If any of you are interested in Sheetz Corporation, here's the trick. We think of it as a convenience store. It really is a good career path in many ways. People who work for Sheetz in their lifetime sometimes find themselves in really good management positions. He's a good contact for you. Today, guys, we're going to be finishing Chapter 1. Actually, we're going to be finishing Chapter 1 at the beginning of class. We're going to be reviewing Chapter 1, and we're going to be going into Chapter 2. Now, several of you still have not submitted your LinkedIn assignment. Guys, I want to make this clear. What you need to do to count as having submitted this assignment, go to your LinkedIn page. Whatever your personal URL, your personal web address is, copy and paste that into Canvas. That's how I grade your assignment. I'm not knocking points off yet, but that was due on Friday. Please get that done. I'm going to start grading those, hopefully have those graded by the middle of the week. We also have your 5 environments of business assignment that's due tonight. Then we get a little break till our next assignment. Guys, here's a couple other things of note so that you know what's coming down the pike. One of the things that I really want to use this class for is to get you guys ready for your professional careers. Although it's a 100 level class, we want to put more of that real world stuff in. Our friends from Career Services are going to be coming over probably in about 2 weeks. And they're going to be plugging 2 things for Career Services. How many of you have heard about a program we use here called Handshake? If you haven't heard of it, it's a networking tool, and it's a way you can put your resume online and employers can come looking for you. So we want to help you with that. It's like LinkedIn, but it's geared specifically for college students. And they also have a product called Big Interview. If you want to practice your interview skills, you can do that by yourself online. We're going to be previewing both products. They're going to be coming to see us. That'll be sometime in the next couple of weeks. Guys, we're going to jump in today. I'm not going to do any current events for the first part of the class because we have some for the second part of the class. You guys remember we left off talking about the 5 environments of business. Guys, we are really lucky in the United States that we have a lot of natural resources. Guys, what are some of the natural resources we have that make our country so strong in the United States? What are things that give us an advantage? Because we're a big country. What do we have in this country that gives us a global advantage? I'll give you a hint. Earl mentioned one of them on Friday. We're the largest producer of what? That everybody needs. Comes out of pumps. Gas, petroleum. We're one of the largest sources of petroleum. We actually are the largest producer of petroleum in the world right now. We also, guys, have large tracts of industrial areas and lots of agriculture. Up until the middle, probably 19th century, the 1800s, we were primarily an agricultural economy. We were primarily farming, and when the Industrial Revolution hit, all of a sudden we were really well situated. And here's the other trick too, guys. I don't say this to bring up any negativity, but after World War II, we were one of the only major industrial countries in the world that was largely untouched. So we really contributed to the rebuilding of Europe and the rest of the world after World War II. That's how we got so powerful in the later part of the 20th century. So we've got an agricultural business evolving into industry. And here's the other trick now too, guys. Most food that we eat does not come from family farms. It comes from factory farms. Give me an example of a food that you shouldn't be able to get in the middle of the winter that you can get in the middle of the winter now. Yes? Oranges. Yeah, fantastic. Because whether we're going to Florida or we're going to South America, it's global, right? What's another one? What's something else that people love around Valentine's Day that we shouldn't be able to get this time of year? Yeah, strawberries. We can get fresh strawberries from anywhere in the world. Guys, that's why agriculture is a global business, and that's why big factory farms are making it so easy to stay connected. So when we start saying things like, for example, we want to reduce imports, sometimes we're not thinking about those kinds of things as well. Here's the other trick. Even though we're talking about farms that are doing agricultural things, guys, farms still are relying on technology, whether it is disease-resistant crops and things like genetically modified organisms. I leave that to your own decision whether or not those are good or bad things, or the idea of trading commodities on global exchanges. Agriculture is global at this point, although there's a movement back toward going to local agriculture, which is a pretty good thing in my opinion. One of the other things too, guys, when we start talking about industries in the United States, if you work for General Motors and you make cars, you're working in heavy industry. If you work for a local farm, if you work for Velwood Farms over here that's a dairy, you work in agriculture. Almost everybody else works in the service industry. About 8 out of every 10 people work in the service industry. Can somebody give me an example of a job that would count as part of the service industry? Yes. Yeah, it's a great example. By the way, plumbers, man, making big bank these days. The average plumber makes between $80 and $200 an hour. So those folks working on their own tradespeople, it's crazy. You know why they're getting such a good wage? On top of the fact that everybody needs them, nobody wants to be them. So there are fewer people going into that profession. It's creating higher demand. Somebody else give me an example of somebody who works in the service economy. Yes? Yeah, mechanics too. Do you know the average age of the car if we took all cars in the United States and divided them, what's the average age of the car on the road in the United States? How'd you know that? That's exactly the right answer. Is that a random guess? Man, play the lottery today. That's a great guess. Guys, if you win anything, man, cut me in for 20% because I encourage you to do that. Guys, the average car on the road is 12 years old. So if you're a mechanic, you got a built-in business, guys. By the way, does anybody know, for people who are buying new cars, what's the average American car payment per month? Anybody ever guess? Yes, sir. It's actually going up a little higher. It's about $600. And the average term goes between 5 and 7 years. She's talking about people driving depreciating assets. By the way, guys, if you ever have the option to not buy a new car, if you can buy a low-mileage used car, that'll be one of the smartest things you ever do. How much value does your car lose when you drive it off the lot? Any idea of what percentage? Unless you're driving a Jeep Wrangler, which they hold their value like crazy, the average car drops about 10 to 15% in value the day you drive it off the lot. So the day you buy your car, and as soon as it leaves the dealer's lot, it's worth 10 to 15% less than the 10 minutes before you bought it. How crazy is that, guys? I'm not going to tell you I've never bought a new car. I have, but go into it knowing that risk. So in terms of the service industry, guys, I work in the service industry. Education is service. Healthcare is service. Financial services are service. Most of us will work in service. It's a big deal, and it's a bright future because we're doing more things globally these days as well. So what we're going to do now, guys, we're going to review Chapter 1 before we go into Chapter 2. Now, Chapter 2, we're going to be getting into economics. What I would like you to do, guys, when I bring up a question, feel free to answer it. What you're going to see on these, by the way, these PowerPoints, I would pay attention to this because these very same questions often appear on your exam. In fact, after we get through Chapters 1, 2, and 3, I'll actually email you a study guide to study for the exam. So this is a good opportunity to see the kind of questions you're likely to see in this class. All right, guys. The total amount of money a business takes in during a given period by selling goods and services. Is that revenue, profit, loss, or GDP? It was a good guess. It's actually revenue. Now, if we took what we actually made after we paid our expenses, then we got our profit. Revenue is the total amount of money that we bring in. That's the difference between the two. Good guess, though. If a business is operating and not making money, what's it operating at? That's a type of business, but the business itself is operating at it's C. It's a loss. By the way, guys, psychology says if you don't know the answer to a question, what letter should you always guess? C. Yeah, for whatever reason, us instructors love C. It's a good guess, though. If a company is not designed to make a profit, they are a non-profit. Can somebody tell me a major corporation in the United States that is not making a profit? Yes. Netflix is not making a profit. You're absolutely correct. Yes, sir. Uber is not making a profit. You guys are on it. Anybody got one more? Tesla, you're absolutely right. They're still struggling to become profitable. Good, good, good. You guys got this. Which of the following is not one of the 5 environments of business? Is it economic and legal, technological, competitive, or moral? Yes, sir. D. Correct. Although we hope we're making moral decisions, it's not something we accounted for in the 5 environments of business. True or false? This was one I mentioned really early in class, guys. Over half of the executive workforce is male. It's actually false. It's slightly tilted female at this point, about 52%. I mentioned that one time early on. Don't feel bad. We're reviewing for a reason. The 5 factors of production include all of the following except, is it land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, or liberty? Which is not one of the factors? Yes, sir. You are correct. All right, guys, in terms of the U.S., true or false? We're primarily an agricultural economy. True. It's false. What kind are we? We just talked about it.
Technological or...
Begins with an S. Service economy. You got it, guys. All right, true or false? Based on our textbook's interpretation of the term, the U.S. has the highest standard of living in the world.
False.
That is false. People who are willing to gamble with large amounts of money have a high tolerance. Is it for gambling, alcohol, risk, or uncertainty?
Risk.
It is risk. Maybe alcohol, too, if you're making bad decisions. Buying or selling goods and services via the internet. What do we call that? E-commerce. Hot term these days, guys. And that's our review for Chapter 1. I'm going to set up for Chapter 2 here because we're going to start off today with some conversation about things such as the economy and cash in general. But before we get started on Chapter 2, because it's time for a quick break, I would like a question or comment from the audience about absolutely anything. What would you guys like to talk about today before we get into our next chapter? What's a question I can answer? Or comment? I'm an open book today. Sir? No, sir, I did not. I have no interest in the Grammys. Yes, sir.
What do you think about the recent virus coming out in China?
Scary stuff, isn't it? So we're talking about the coronavirus, guys. And have you guys been following how China is managing this? How many of you have been following this? What have you seen in the news about it?
They're trying to they're trying to, control the situation and make it seem a lot less bad than it actually is. Like they're trying to minimize the situation.
So they're downplaying the risk. Are they doing other things? What else are they doing? They built a hospital in 7 days, an entire hospital. Like, how do you do that? That's quicker than for real. It's 7 days. And they're also quarantined a city of 250 million people. It would be hard enough to say, nobody's leaving this campus today, and we've got maybe on a good day, 1,200 people on campus at any given time. They're quarantining a city of 250 million people. How is this going to work out? Is it going to stop the spread of this disease? I don't think so either. People are going to keep getting out. I'm a little concerned about it because here's the things that are very kind of reprehensible about this disease. It seems just like the flu. That's number one. And number two, it's got a gestation period of 2 weeks, which means I could be in China, I could come home and be home for a week and a half or 2 weeks without anybody realizing I have it. And how many people maybe have I come in touch with between that time? Thousands. So it is scary stuff. And it also hurts commerce, too, because people aren't going to work. Excellent, excellent questions. Before we get in, guys, any other questions or comments? You guys are bringing up good things. I do want to make one more comment about the Grammys, though. I gave you a very flip answer to that. I just don't think the Grammys are relevant anymore. To me, it's like everybody in here, by show of hands, how many of you consume most of your music through some kind of streaming? Yeah, we're not really doing much in music sales these days, guys. And I bet if I went around to every one of your playlists, they're all vastly different because we can listen to whatever we want. If we go back 20 years, how did most people find out about new music 20 years ago? Radio. We're all listening to the same thing. Oh, I listen to a rock station, so I'm going to hear the same 12 rock songs. Or if I listen to a country station, I'm going to hear the same 12 country songs, or the same 12 hip-hop songs, or pop songs, or whatever. We can all listen to whatever we want now. And I think the Grammys' usefulness has passed. But I support your willingness to disagree. Guys, we're going to be talking about economics today. And what economics is all about is how money moves through economies, guys. We're going to be talking about what's so great about different economic systems, in particular capitalism. When I say this, guys, there may be people in here who believe in socialism. There may be people in here who believe in communism. I'm a capitalist and I'm not apologetic about that. I believe in the free market. That being said, I also believe that there are elements of the other economic systems that we need in our system as well. We all enjoy shared roads. We all need health care. I support your willingness to take on one of these other economic systems as your system of choice. Have an opinion, and I support your ability to have that opinion. We're also going to be talking about how none of these economies in their purest form really work all that well. So we're going to be talking about how money moves through ecosystems. So what we're talking about, this is not going to take the place of Economics 101 or 102. It is, however, going to take the idea of how money moves through a basic economy and give you some commentary based on the country in which you live, why money works in the way that it does. We're going to start off today, though, however, with a conversation about cash, which is also going to pull us to a video about cash. Guys, how many of you on a regular basis, if you're willing to share, pay for anything using cash? How many of you will avoid using cash like the plague? How many of you have not yet raised your hand for either? That's okay too. It's okay not to have an opinion yet. Guys, there are lots of people who believe that you should pay for everything in cash, particularly, generally speaking, older generations. Why do older generations feel that way? Why are they so cash-centric? Yes, sir.
Because that's what they grew up on.
Yeah, they're very familiar with it, right? We always got paid that way. Are there other reasons older generations prefer cash? Yes, sir.
They don't want to deal with technology.
That's exactly right. So we also now have a younger generation who prefers, in many ways, cashless. Somebody who prefers cashless, why do you prefer that? Why do you prefer not having to carry cash? Yes, sir.
Can't lose it.
You can't lose it. It's always, unless you get hacked, but you can't actually lose it most of the time. Yes, sir.
It's quicker.
It is quick, isn't it? Is there another reason? Yes, sir. I'm sorry?
You can keep track of everything you pay for it.
Yeah, you can log on to your bank account or your credit card statement and know, for example, where you were at a given point in time. It's traceable. So people have different opinions about it. Well, there's been a movement in certain places, in particular some of the bigger cities, to start eliminating cash as a payment option. And there's been some pushback against it. We're going to watch about a 6-minute video about what's happening in some major cities like Philadelphia and New York City in terms of some of the pushback against cashless. What I'm going to ask you guys to do, if you would, for the next 6 minutes, please close your laptops, put your phones away. We're going to all watch this video together. I'm going to actually come out and ask you some questions. Yes, sir.
I think it's pretty dumb.
Tell me more. Which side of it is dumb?
You just gotta like give it all the money in the United States. Figure it out collecting it.
Yeah, that's a good question. If we tried to do it, how logistically could we even do it? So are we no longer going to recognize our own currency? So it's difficult. Yes.
It's hard to work around things like a lot of Americans are required. So you can't just exclude those.
Yeah, we've got an entire group of people. We refer to it. By the way, guys, the term is actually called the informal economy. There are people who still do things for cash. For example, in areas where we don't have Uber, there are still ways to get around. If you want to pay somebody $10 to run you to the store, for example, even if there's not a cab. So we've got that entrenched as well. Are there other issues to consider here? Is there anybody that likes the idea of a cashless society?
So you said that like all using cards is traceable. Like, isn't it not always good to be traced all the time?
I would argue.
Knowing like where I'm at all the time.
You know, and I think that you raised one of the exact points that both sides are kind of bringing up. You've got folks, for example, who are saying, well, we want autonomy. If I want to be able to buy something that maybe other people would frown upon, it should be my business, whether I'm paying for it and how I'm paying for it. The flip side is what some of these folks, like that economics professor, were basically saying, we're enabling illegal activity by continuing to have cash. Is there a particular semi-legal industry in this country that's dependent on cash? Yeah, go ahead and say it.
Marijuana.
Yeah, the marijuana industry, guys. We think about it. If we go to places like Colorado, we go to places like Oregon, we go to, for goodness sake, Washington, D.C., where recreational marijuana is legal in those areas. It's still illegal at the federal level. The feds have chosen not to enforce drug policy. They basically said, we're not going to enforce the law, but we're not going to take it off the books. So that being said, if you were in that industry, why would you maybe not want to put your money in the bank? Who controls the banks?
The feds.
The feds control the banks. I guarantee that if you look at any of these businesses, whether they're in Colorado or wherever they are, most of these are cash-only businesses or predominantly cash businesses. Do you think they're reporting everything they're earning to the IRS? I doubt it. And so that's one of the arguments for and against cash in terms of what we're using it for and how we're using it. Any other thoughts, guys? Here's the flip side. You know what I absolutely hate? I hate going to a convenience store at 7 in the morning and getting behind somebody who's buying cigarettes and lottery tickets and paying with a check. That drives me insane. I can still go for cash. I think we should get rid of checks. I'm tired of checks, but I don't want to get rid of cash just yet. Feel free to agree or disagree, guys. Any other thoughts before we jump back in?
I think
Okay, guys, we're going to continue bringing this stuff up for discussion. But today, we're going to be talking about economics. Guys, economics is something you all have to take if you're a business major. And if you're not a business major, I hope you'll consider taking a class in economics. What we're looking at, economics is basically saying, how does money move through a country? How does money move through our economy? This little discussion we had about cash is important. Guys, what economic group is being most affected by the transition into a cashless society? Who is on the short end of the stick there? Is it rich people or poor people? Poor people who tend to operate more in cash, don't have credit cards or bank accounts. That's why we study this stuff. So economics in general is we're studying how money moves through an economy. If we're looking at macroeconomics, we're looking at an entire country. How does money move through a country? If we're going into micro, we're looking into specific markets, specific locations. For example, here in Loretto, Pennsylvania, please put your phones away, guys. In Loretto, Pennsylvania, we probably have more people using cash, percentage-wise, than we have, for example, in Philadelphia. What's different about Loretto from Philadelphia? Yes?
Some like old hicks out here. And then, like, city people.
To use your term, there are plenty of old hicks around here, for sure. And sometime I'll teach an entire class in Central Pennsylvania to speak just for you, just because you brought that up. But we do have rural folks who tend to do more with cash than city folks do. We look at microeconomics, we might look, for example, how that affects the way people spend money, especially if they don't have credit. So economics also means how are we taking the resources we have and turning them into something that produces profit. Let me give you an example. Can anybody in this room tell me why in the last 5 years the United States has become the largest producer of petroleum in the world? What changed? It used to be Saudi Arabia, now it's us. What changed? What process allowed us to start extracting oil in the great state of Pennsylvania? Fracking, hydraulic fracturing. It was a game changer, and it's changed the way we get the petroleum pockets we could normally have never gotten to. Regardless if you're for it or against it, it has transformed the economy of the Northeast, for example. That's a new way of creating goods and services, a new way of developing things. Guys, sometimes we have economies that are right next to each other who perform very, very differently. Here we've got Seoul, South Korea, one of the most technologically advanced cities in the world. Right next to their neighbor to the north, North Korea, people can't get enough to eat. What's the difference, guys? They're both on the same peninsula, for God's sakes. What's different between these two countries? Yes, sir. Tell me more, because you're exactly correct. Yeah, we've got a closed-off system in the north that relies heavily on foreign aid, primarily from China, just to keep its people fed. And down here we've got a free market economy that's expressing technology left and right. One of the largest car manufacturers in the world is based in South Korea. Who am I talking about? Begins with an H. Hyundai comes from South Korea. That's the difference. Nobody can name a North Korean-made automobile because there probably aren't any. Guys, different economic systems are affecting the way we do things. Guys, we talk a lot about how stuff is changing. What do you think are the next big things? What's going to transform our economy in the next 10 to 15 years? You just say, if we're talking the developed world, we're talking the United States, we're talking Europe, we're talking Asia, the places that have developed economies. What are going to be our next big things? What's going to change the face of how we buy and sell products in the next 5 to 10, 15 years?
Probably a recession.
Tell me more.
Every like 8 to 10 years there'd be a recession. So if I want to, and that's gonna like alter the whole global economy.
Absolutely correct. No presidential candidate will ever tell you that recessions are a natural part of the economic cycle, but they just are. They happen. So whether it's Barack Obama or Donald Trump, if they're telling you we can stay out of a recession forever, they're lying. It just can't happen. So we got economic turmoil that's going to happen. What else is shaping the face of the way our businesses are changing? I'll give you a hint. Think about the last time you went to a supermarket. Yes? Robotics and automation. Tell me more about how that's going to transform our economy.
It's going to change like the jobs available for people, like at grocery stores and stuff. They self-checkout. And I know Martin's is doing this thing where they're they're kind of combining like the regular checkout and self checkout to make like it's like a joint thing, so where you can scan your own items and wait, like so where like it's like you have a belt in front of you, you scan it, and then the items roll down. So it's like they're really pushing, companies are trying to push automation more, and that's going to slowly phase out jobs for people like uneducated people or people that aren't able to get hired from jobs.
You absolutely got it. Automation and AI. Well, here's the trick. Those of us who are watching this automation happen, the first thing we think of is, wow, this is going to affect people with entry-level jobs. A study by IBM, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, said that about 50% of decisions made by corporations at the C-suite, at the high level, could be automated. Think about this, guys. If we're using analytics and we're looking at multiple data sources, companies are already using AI to do trades on stocks and to manage their portfolios. There's every reason to believe that white-collar workers could be affected by this stuff as well. So we're talking AI, we're talking automation, we're talking now driverless cars. What else should we be thinking about in terms of things that are going to affect our economic future? Anything else you could think of? I'll give you one more hint. We got a couple big trade deals that just happened to speed up commerce between countries. Are we going to become more or less global? Yeah, you better believe it. Guys, what happens in China affects us. What happens here affects Mexico and Canada. We are connected. Guys, when we start thinking about how we're developing this economy, more and more things are going to be happening at a global cycle. There was a guy named Thomas Malthus. You're going to learn all about him based on what economic theory you subscribe to, and you're going to learn this in your economics classes. But he basically believed it was problematic if too many people at the top had all the resources and they were not shared with everybody else. Thomas Malthus came up with the idea. Thomas Carl called economics the dismal science, meant it was depressing. Guys, most of the wealth in this country is concentrated. We joke when we say the top 1%. Depending on which economist you listen to, most of the wealth in this country is concentrated in the top 7 to 15%. That means a very small percentage of the United States controls most of the money. It's good if you're in that percentage. It's not so good if you're not. Guys, if we go by age groups here too, who here has most financial power in the United States? What age group? Yes, sir. I thought you were raising your hand. I'm sorry. What age group did you guess? Yes. Yeah, I would completely agree with you. People over the age of 60 to 65 still are controlling most of the wealth in this country. They invested well. They inherited a great economy. We've got millennials, for example, the generation right before you guys, that are having a hard time finding housing, paying off loans, all of these things. So we're also seeing a large disparity in wealth. And we also see it based on where you live and where you come from. Now, then we get into some of these other folks, for example, some macroeconomists. We're talking people who look at the whole, think that having more people is a good thing. It means we can get more educated folks into the economy. We can have more people creating wealth. And almost all economists emphasize the idea of education. Now, who here has ever heard of something called trickle-down economics? What does it mean?
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's okay. It's okay not to know. That's how we learn. Yes, sir.
I know, like, give money to big businesses. It's supposed to go down to other, like, smaller entities.
Exactly right. Let's say this front row here, all five of us, we own all the businesses in this town. And you guys all live in this town. So we own the big businesses, and most people work for us. Well, you guys here own convenience stores and gas stations. You guys here own clothing stores. If we're the biggest employer in town, and we're making money, people are getting money, what happens to rows 2 and 3, guys? We got convenience stores and restaurants, we got clothing stores. What happens, Toby? You got it. And the theory is the more money that we make as the owners of these companies, the more money our employees make, the more they spread the wealth around. There are some people who agree that that works. Some people don't think that it works. Adam Smith believed this concept was called the invisible hand. It meant if you didn't get in the way of business, if you didn't overly regulate business, if you let people make money and be successful, they'd reinvest in their communities and pass on the wealth. It doesn't always happen, guys. Let's be honest here. Us guys here in the front row, we're the only big employers in town. We're paying our people. What are we paying? What do you think is a good living wage? We run factories. What should we be paying?
The living wage?
Yeah. So we're paying $15 an hour. And our profits are going crazy. We're doing really well. 10 years from now, we're still getting people that want to work for us. Do we really need to give them a raise? No, we don't have to. Because we're the only games in town. They're going to keep working for us for $15 an hour, even though adjusted for inflation, they're not making the same amount of money. That's the hole in the theory that that Adam Smith had. Basically, assuming that people would always do the right thing. Now, in a good economy, if we're paying $15 an hour and there's a factory down the street paying 20, where's everybody going to go? They're going to go down there, man, and we're going to have to compete or we're going to lose our good people. But it doesn't always work in a linear fashion. So the idea was we would reward people who worked hard. So the bottom line, though, is that sometimes there are business owners who get that equation, and there's sometimes business owners who don't. You remember I had mentioned a statistic. Actually, Earl told me after class I shouldn't mention this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Does anybody remember, I said out of every dollar that Sheetz makes, how much is profit? It's a penny. It's because they substantially reinvest in their people. If you go to Sheetz, for example, their wage scales are higher than other convenience stores because they care about their people. They have to live with a lower profit margin, but as a result, they've got market dominance in the areas in which they compete. So sometimes Adam Smith's theory works, sometimes it doesn't. What this ultimately comes down is the idea, again, of the invisible hand. If you treat somebody well, they're going to treat other people well, and everybody prospers. Guys, don't forget to submit your 5 environments of business by midnight tonight. If you have not yet sent me your link for your LinkedIn page, please do so. If you're having issues with it, come see me. Guys, have a good day. Stay warm.
Quick question.
Sir.